Members of a Manhattan grand jury will reportedly vote today on whether to indict Donald Trump.
And that decision could make Trump the first former president to face criminal charges.
Washington Post reporter Matt Brown is joining us to talk about the status of these investigations. Matt, good morning. Nice to have you with us.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Okay, so today's a pivotal day. It could be making history. This is a possible indictment, not an arrest. There is a two very different things here. What is on the table for the former president today, Matt?
Yeah, so the Manhattan District Attorney is basically investigating whether or not Trump potentially broke campaign finance laws as part of his 2016 campaign when he did hush money payments to keep silent an adult film actress who claimed that she had an affair with him. That situation now is being investigated by the grand jury in Manhattan, who is going to vote on whether or not they have enough evidence that would be convincing in a court of law to indict Trump on possible campaign finance charges.
And what's the former president saying about all of this?
Well, Trump has basically accused the grand jury of being politically weaponized, as have many Republicans in Congress. He has denied any payments that are claimed in the case, and has also said that he has called for his supporters to rally to his defense if he is indicted, which is not clear that it necessarily will happen. But given that Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney, said that he is very committed to investigating this case to wherever it leads, that has set off, obviously, a chain reaction in Trump's circles.
And Matt, to be clear, the hush money that went to Stormy Daniels, that transaction wasn't necessary. That's not illegal, the process of doing that. It's the potentially falsified business records. Is that really the sort of the specific issue here that the DA is going after?
Well, there's a lot of different potential criminal charges that the DA could be going after. As I said, with the campaign finance question, with the different shell companies that were potentially illegally created to facilitate this, but the actual transactions surrounding directly Stormy Daniels and whether or not she could pay to keep her story silent, that part of the question is not technically illegal, no, but all of the activities around it are what this particular case could arraign Trump for.
Matt, it seems like it's always campaign season, of course, 2024 coming into focus. How would a potential indictment divide an already divided Republican Party?
Well, it's very interesting. A lot of my colleagues this morning just reported that the Trump campaign is already getting prepared to basically campaign under indictment. And they're almost in some ways kind of relishing the preparations for what this is going to mean for the rest of the field, because obviously a lot of other candidates, for instance, already announced presidential candidate Nikki Haley, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is seen as a likely presidential contender, are going to have to triangulate around the situation, which is very animating for the Republican base.
But for the Trump team, will it even matter to them if they're campaigning while this is going on as well, or just kind of brush it aside and keep their eyes on November 2024?
Well, regardless of it matters to the Trump team, it definitely matters to Trump, and he is definitely going to be talking about it. He's already indicated that he believed that he would be indicted or arrested tomorrow, yesterday, but that did not actually end up happening. But it doesn't seem that he has a high willingness to discuss whatever is going to be happening in this case, and sees it, if not as politically advantageous, then something that his supporters should be very aware of.
If the DA is hoping to shut down Trump with some of these allegations, do you feel like this could backfire and maybe fire up those strong supporters for Trump? And I mean, listen, if you get a picture or video of Trump walking in handcuffs, I mean, like that is the ultimate, suggestion that he could be guilty. You've got his loyalists that are saying, hey, he's being, this is wrongdoing here. We're going to support him now more than ever.
So because this is a white-collar case, there are many ways that the district attorney could bring Trump in without having necessarily the visibility around him coming in. There's lots of different ways to get inside of the Manhattan district attorney's building, for instance. But if Trump wants to go in through the front door and make a big scene of it, then he is able to do that. And that is something that the New York Police Department has been preparing for at the moment because of the type of spectacle that it could be. I think that it's really interesting to note the difference between the legal questions here and the political accountability questions that a lot of people are debating in the country. The legal question here is not necessarily something that is part of the broader questions, especially that are of criminal interference that Trump could be indicted in, for instance, in the Fulton County special grand jury inquiry or at the federal level. This case is not necessarily going to be the biggest legal challenge that Trump could be facing, even just as part of this campaign. And I think that that's going to play very politically with his supporters as well.
We also have the government documents at Mar-a-Lago, January 6th. There's certainly a lot to keep track of. Matt Brown, Washington Post reporter, we know you'll have a busy day, so we appreciate you sharing some of your time with us this morning.
Thank you.